There are days where even the smallest things feel heavy. Getting out of bed feels like lifting something invisible, but enormous. Your phone lights up with messages you don't have the energy to answer. The dishes stay in the sink longer than usual. You stare at the ceiling longer than you want to admit. And somehow, the world keeps moving, like none of it matters. That's one of the hardest parts. Life doesn't pause just because you're overwhelmed. People still expect replies. Work still needs to get done. Bills still arrive. Responsibilities still wait for you in the morning. And sometimes you wonder if anyone notices how hard you're trying just to stay steady. Not to succeed. Not to thrive. Just to hold yourself together long enough to get through another day. You might look completely normal from the outside. You might still laugh at the right moments. You might still show up where you're needed. But internally, you feel stretched thin. Like one more disappointment could undo you. Sometimes you sit quietly for a few extra minutes before walking into work or school because you need time to prepare yourself to act okay. Sometimes you replay the same worries over and over while doing ordinary things like folding clothes or washing dishes. And sometimes the exhaustion is so deep that even resting doesn't feel like rest anymore. You tell yourself to push through it. You tell yourself other people have it worse. You tell yourself you're being dramatic. But deep down, you know this heaviness is real. There are moments when the simplest question feels impossible to answer. How are you? Because the honest answer would take too long to explain. How do you explain being tired in a way sleep cannot fix? How do you explain feeling emotionally crowded all the time? How do you explain that your mind never fully relaxes anymore? So instead, you just say, "I'm fine," or "just stressed," because it feels easier than opening the door to everything you've been carrying silently. And the silence becomes part of your routine. You continue helping people. You continue showing up. You continue pretending you're managing better than you really are. But late at night, when everything becomes quiet, the weight returns. You think about all the things you haven't figured out yet. The pressure to keep going. The fear that maybe you're falling behind. The loneliness of feeling emotionally exhausted while trying to appear strong. And some nights, you don't even cry anymore. You just feel numb, like your mind became too tired to react. That's what heavy days can do to people. Not always dramatic breakdowns. Sometimes it's just a slow emotional fading, a quiet disconnection from yourself, little by little. But even now, there is something important you need to hear. Just because you're struggling does not mean you are failing. Some people are fighting battles nobody can see. Some people are carrying grief they never fully talked about. Some people are surviving pressure that would overwhelm anyone. And maybe right now, that person is you. So if all you did today was survive, that still matters. If all you could manage was getting through the day without completely giving up, that still counts for something. Because there are seasons of life where strength does not look powerful or inspiring. Sometimes strength looks like brushing your teeth when your mind feels dark. Sometimes it looks like answering one message after avoiding your phone for hours. Sometimes it looks like taking a deep breath and continuing anyway. And even if nobody else sees how hard this season has been for you, your effort is still real. You are not weak for feeling overwhelmed. You are human. There's a particular kind of sadness that comes from watching yourself become unfamiliar. You remember when things felt easier, when your energy came naturally, when replying to a text didn't feel emotionally exhausting, when your mind wasn't crowded every second of the day. You remember laughing more easily, making plans without overthinking them, feeling hopeful about the future instead of anxious every time you thought about it. And now, even simple things can feel difficult. You delay tasks for days because your mind feels overwhelmed before you even begin. You open messages and leave them unanswered because you don't know how to explain your absence. You promise yourself that tomorrow will be different. But tomorrow arrives, and somehow the heaviness is still there. And slowly, you begin comparing yourself to everyone around you. Someone else seems more successful, more disciplined, more confident, more certain about where their life is going. Meanwhile, you feel stuck, like everyone else received instructions for life that you somehow missed. You watch people moving forward while you're still trying to recover from things nobody fully understands. And that comparison becomes painful because deep down, you start believing your struggle means you're failing. You see old classmates building careers, people your age getting married, friends becoming more stable, more accomplished, more secure. And you wonder why everything feels harder for you, why your energy disappears so quickly, why your motivation comes and goes, why it takes so much effort just to do what others seem to do naturally. The shame grows quietly, not loud enough for people to notice, but loud enough to follow you everywhere. You feel it when someone asks what you've been doing lately. You feel it when people talk excitedly about their plans while you secretly feel lost. You feel it when you compare your current life to the expectations you once had for yourself. And maybe the hardest part is the guilt. Because you know you should be grateful. You know you should try harder. You know other people are struggling too. So instead of being compassionate with yourself, you become harsher. You criticize yourself constantly. You call yourself lazy when you're actually emotionally drained. You call yourself weak when you've simply been carrying too much for too long. But emotional exhaustion can make even ordinary life feel heavy. People often underestimate what prolonged stress does to a person, how it slowly affects motivation, focus, confidence, and hope. When someone spends months or years surviving emotionally difficult seasons, they do not emerge untouched. Sometimes they become tired in ways they cannot explain. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And maybe right now, becoming feels difficult, because when you're overwhelmed, you stop thinking about growth. You just think about survival. making it through the week, paying your bills, getting enough sleep, trying not to completely fall apart in front of people. But survival does not make you less worthy. You are not behind because your path became difficult. You are not failing because your healing took longer than expected. Life is not experienced equally by everyone. Some people are building while others are recovering. Some people are moving forward while others are trying to rebuild themselves quietly after disappointment, burnout, heartbreak, pressure, or emotional exhaustion. And rebuilding takes time. There are wounds people cannot see from the outside. There are battles that never become visible enough for others to understand. That's why you need to stop measuring your life only through comparison. Because comparison rarely tells the full story. It only shows outcomes, not loneliness, not anxiety, not sleepless nights, not silent struggles. And maybe you've spent so much time feeling behind that you forgot something important. A slower season of life is not a wasted one. Some seasons are not about achievement. Some seasons are about healing your mind, learning your limits, understanding yourself more honestly, finding stability again. And none of that is shameful. You are allowed to grow slowly. You are allowed to take longer than expected. You are allowed to still be figuring things out, because being human is not a race. And your worth was never supposed to depend on how quickly you reached certain milestones. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is continue living without becoming bitter toward themselves. And if that is what you've been doing lately, then you are doing better than you think. Heavy days do not always end when the day ends. Sometimes the hardest moments arrive at night, when everything finally becomes quiet. No notifications, no conversations, no distractions, just you and your thoughts. And suddenly, your mind begins replaying everything all over again. Things you should have said differently. Conversations you regret. Mistakes you still feel embarrassed about years later. Moments where you disappointed someone. Moments where someone disappointed you. Your body is tired, but your mind refuses to slow down. You keep thinking about the future, about money, about relationships, about whether your life is actually moving forward or standing still. And the more you try to stop thinking, the louder your thoughts become. That's what makes mental exhaustion so difficult. You cannot simply walk away from your own mind. Even during moments that are supposed to feel peaceful, your thoughts continue searching for problems to solve. You analyze everything: the tone of someone's message, the pause before they responded, the way someone looked at you during a conversation, the possibility that maybe you said too much or not enough. And eventually, overthinking becomes automatic. You don't even realize you're doing it anymore. Your mind stays alert all the time, almost like it forgot how to relax. Even small situations begin to feel emotionally overwhelming. One awkward interaction can ruin your entire evening. One piece of criticism can stay in your head for days. One unanswered message can convince you that people are pulling away from you. And deep down, You know your mind is exhausting you, but you also know the thoughts come from somewhere, usually from fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of losing people, fear of making mistakes, fear that somehow you are not enough. So your mind keeps trying to protect you by thinking ahead constantly. If you analyze everything, maybe you can avoid getting hurt again. If you prepare for every possibility, maybe you can stay in control. But eventually, constant mental pressure becomes its own kind of suffering. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." At first, that realization can feel uncomfortable, because once you begin paying attention to your patterns, you notice things you ignored before. You notice how quickly you blame yourself, how often you expect rejection before it even happens, how difficult it is for you to rest without guilt, how uncomfortable silence feels, because your mind immediately fills it with worry. And maybe you begin realizing that your thoughts have not always been kind to you. Maybe you became so used to criticizing yourself that you started believing every negative thought automatically. You call yourself lazy when you're exhausted. You call yourself weak when you're overwhelmed. You call yourself a failure while still fighting battles nobody else can see. Over time, that inner voice becomes heavy. Not because one bad thought destroys you, but because thousands of small negative thoughts slowly wear you down. And what makes it even harder is that many people suffer silently like this. They smile during conversations while internally overthinking every word they say. They appear calm while mentally carrying constant pressure. They look functional from the outside while feeling emotionally exhausted inside. Some people have not truly relaxed in years. Their body sits still, but their mind never does. And eventually, you become tired in a way sleep cannot fix. Because the problem is not only physical exhaustion, it's emotional overload. Too many worries, too many fears, too many thoughts carried alone for too long. There are nights when your mind convinces you that your entire life is falling apart. And then morning comes, and you realize exhaustion made everything feel heavier than it actually was. But in those nighttime moments, the emotions feel real. The loneliness feels real. The fear feels real. The uncertainty feels real. That's why you need gentleness during seasons like this, not constant self-punishment. Your mind is not your enemy. It is a tired part of you, trying to protect you the only way it knows how. And maybe healing does not begin by forcing every thought to disappear. Maybe it begins by learning not to believe every fearful thought immediately, by pausing before turning every mistake into proof that you are failing, by allowing yourself moments of rest without guilt, by remembering that being overwhelmed does not make you broken. You are a human being, carrying stress, fear, pressure, uncertainty, and emotional fatigue all at once. Of course your mind feels tired, but tired minds still deserve compassion, especially from the person living inside them every day. Sometimes the most exhausting part is not the pain itself. It's pretending the pain is not there. It's smiling during conversations while feeling emotionally drained inside. It's answering, "I'm okay," automatically, because explaining the truth feels too complicated. It's continuing your responsibilities while secretly wondering how much longer you can keep doing this without breaking down. A lot of people become experts at hiding their exhaustion. They still go to work, still reply to messages, still show up for family and friends, still laugh at the right moments. And because they continue functioning, nobody realizes how overwhelmed they actually feel. But surviving and feeling okay are not the same thing. Some people are carrying sadness so quietly that even the people closest to them never fully notice. And over time, pretending becomes a habit. You stop expressing what you really feel because you don't want to worry anyone. You stop asking for support because you fear becoming a burden. You convince yourself that everyone else is already dealing with enough. So instead, you carry everything internally: the stress, the loneliness, the pressure, the fear, the emotional exhaustion you cannot properly explain. And eventually, you become tired in a very specific way. Not just physically tired, emotionally tired from constantly performing stability. There's a difference between genuinely being strong and feeling forced to appear strong all the time. Many people learned early that vulnerability felt unsafe. Maybe every time you opened up before, you were ignored, misunderstood, judged, told you were overreacting, told to just stay positive. So now you keep things to yourself automatically, even when you're hurting badly. Especially when you're hurting badly. You tell yourself to hold it together a little longer, to push through one more day, to stay productive, to stop being emotional. But emotions do not disappear simply because you ignore them. They stay inside the body quietly. Sometimes they become anxiety, sometimes numbness, sometimes irritation over small things, sometimes exhaustion that never completely leaves. And the strange thing about emotional suppression is that eventually you stop knowing what you actually feel. You become disconnected from yourself. You get so used to taking care of responsibilities that you stop checking in with your own mind. You become so focused on surviving that you forget what feeling peaceful even looks like. There are people who have spent years being the reliable one, the person everyone depends on, the calm one, the listener, the strong friend, the responsible sibling, the person who always seems emotionally steady. But even strong people become tired too. Even strong people need comfort, need rest, need honesty, need space to admit they are struggling. And sometimes the hardest sentence to say is a simple one. I'm not doing as well as I pretend I am. Because once you admit that, everything becomes real. The exhaustion, the sadness, the loneliness you've been trying to outrun. But there is also relief in honesty. Not dramatic honesty. Not explaining every detail of your pain. Just small, honest moments with yourself. I've been overwhelmed lately. I'm more exhausted than I admit. I've been carrying too much alone. Those kinds of truths matter. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And sometimes, pretending to be fine becomes one of those ways. You stay distracted constantly. You keep yourself busy every hour of the day. You scroll endlessly through your phone to avoid sitting alone with your thoughts, because silence forces you to feel what you've been avoiding. But avoiding pain does not heal it. It usually only delays it. Sooner or later, your mind and body begin asking for honesty. Not perfection, not immediate healing, just honesty. The honesty to admit you're tired. The honesty to admit you cannot carry everything alone forever. The honesty to stop expecting yourself to function like a machine without emotional consequences. You are a human being, not a performance. And maybe part of healing is learning that your worth does not depend on how well you hide your struggles. You do not have to earn compassion by completely falling apart first. You are allowed to need support before reaching your breaking point. You are allowed to rest before your exhaustion becomes unbearable. And you are allowed to stop pretending every single thing is okay when it clearly isn't. Because constantly wearing emotional armor becomes heavy too. And some days, the bravest thing you can do is finally let yourself be honest about how much all of this has hurt you. One of the hardest things about being overwhelmed is that your mind starts treating every problem like an emergency. Suddenly, everything feels urgent. Your future, your finances, your career, your relationships, your healing, your habits, your mistakes. It all crashes into your mind at once. And late at night, when you're already emotionally exhausted, your thoughts begin asking impossible questions. What am I doing with my life? What if nothing gets better? What if I'm wasting time? What if I never figure myself out? You try to solve your entire future in one sitting. You pressure yourself to become disciplined overnight, to heal immediately, to stop overthinking instantly, to completely transform your life all at once. And when you cannot do it perfectly, you feel disappointed in yourself again. That cycle is exhausting because no human being can carry their entire life in one moment. Sometimes, your mind becomes so focused on fixing everything that you forget you are already tired. You forget that exhausted people struggle to think clearly. You forget that emotional pain makes ordinary decisions feel heavier. You forget that healing takes energy too. So instead of slowing down, you become harsher with yourself. You call yourself lazy for resting. You call yourself weak for needing time. You compare your current progress to impossible expectations. But pressure rarely creates peace. Most of the time, it creates paralysis. You stare at everything you need to fix and become so overwhelmed that you end up doing nothing at all. Not because you don't care, but because your mind is overloaded. There are moments where even simple tasks feel emotionally difficult. Answering emails, cleaning your room, returning a phone call, making decisions, getting out of bed on difficult mornings. And when your energy is low, unfinished tasks begin to feel like proof that you are failing. But struggling during overwhelming seasons does not make you incapable. It makes you human. Carl Jung once said, "Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness." And sometimes the darkness is not dramatic. Sometimes it is simply mental exhaustion. Feeling lost, feeling uncertain about where your life is going, feeling emotionally tired from carrying too much pressure internally. During those seasons, your goal cannot be perfection. Your goal must become gentleness, not giving up on yourself, not abandoning your future, just learning how to stop treating yourself like a problem that needs to be solved immediately. Because healing usually happens slower than people expect. Growth happens in ordinary moments, small decisions, small efforts, small acts of care repeated quietly over time. Sometimes surviving difficult seasons looks very simple. Drinking water when you've neglected yourself all day, taking a shower after lying in bed for hours, replying to one message instead of isolating completely, going outside for a few minutes even when your mind says not to. These things may seem small to other people, but when someone is emotionally overwhelmed, small actions can require enormous effort. That effort still matters. You do not need to rebuild your entire life tonight. You do not need all the answers before morning. You do not need to suddenly become fearless, healed, productive, and emotionally certain all at once. You are allowed to take life one day at a time. 1 hour at a time, if necessary. Sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do is stop looking so far ahead, because your mind keeps trying to carry months and years that have not even arrived yet. Meanwhile, today is already heavy enough. There is a quiet kind of strength in focusing only on the next small step, not the entire staircase, just the next step. Get through today. Take care of yourself gently. Rest when you need to. Try again tomorrow. That is not failure. That is survival, with compassion. And maybe compassion is what you've been missing most from yourself lately. Not more pressure, not more shame, not more self-criticism. Just permission to be a person who is still figuring things out. Because nobody truly has life completely solved. Some people simply hide their confusion better than others. Behind confidence, many people are carrying uncertainty too. Behind achievements, many people are emotionally exhausted too. Behind smiles, many people are trying their best not to fall apart too. You are not alone in this feeling. You are not broken because your path feels messy right now. Life is not meant to be understood all at once. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop demanding immediate transformation from yourself and instead say, "This is hard right now, but I will face it one step at a time." And honestly, that is enough. Sometimes the hardest person to miss is the version of yourself you used to be. The version that smiled more easily. The version that felt excited about the future. The version that trusted people without overthinking everything. The version that had energy for simple things. And maybe nobody else notices the difference. Maybe to the world, you still look the same. You still go to work, still respond to people, still continue your responsibilities. But internally, you know something changed. Life changed you. Certain disappointments made you more careful. Certain experiences made you quieter. Certain losses made you emotionally tired in ways you never expected. And sometimes, you sit alone wondering when exactly you became this exhausted version of yourself. You look at old photos and remember moments when you seemed lighter, more open, more hopeful. And it hurts because part of you wants that person back. You miss how easily joy used to arrive. You miss how simple life once felt before stress, heartbreak, pressure, disappointment, or emotional burnout became constant parts of your daily experience. There's grief in realizing survival changes people. Not always dramatically. Sometimes slowly. A little more guarded each year. A little more anxious. A little more emotionally distant, without even meaning to become that way. And one day you realize you no longer react to life the same way you once did. Things that once excited you now feel exhausting. Conversations feel draining faster. Your energy disappears quicker than it used to. And maybe part of you feels guilty for changing. You wonder if becoming more tired, more careful, or more emotionally protective means you failed somehow. But people are shaped by what they carry. Nobody goes through years of pressure, disappointment, stress, loneliness, or emotional pain and remains exactly the same afterward. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." But becoming is complicated, because sometimes, before becoming someone new, you first have to grieve who you used to be. And grief is not only about losing other people. Sometimes, grief is deeply personal. Grieving old hopes, old plans, old versions of yourself that no longer exist the same way anymore. That grief can feel confusing because there is nothing visible to mourn. No ceremony, no clear ending. Just a quiet awareness that something inside you changed. And maybe the hardest part is not knowing whether you will ever feel like yourself again. But healing does not always mean returning to who you once were. Sometimes healing means learning how to care for the person you became after everything happened. Because even if life made you more tired, it may have also made you more understanding, more patient, more aware of other people's pain, more honest about your own limits. Growth is rarely clean or beautiful while it's happening. People often imagine healing as a straight path, but real healing is inconsistent. Some days, you feel hopeful again. Other days, old sadness returns without warning. You can make progress and still struggle sometimes. You can become stronger and still feel emotionally overwhelmed. That does not erase your growth. It simply means healing is human. There are moments where you may feel frustrated with yourself for not moving on faster. You think you should already be okay by now. You think you should already know who you are again. But recovery from emotional exhaustion takes time, especially when you spent years ignoring your own pain just to survive. Sometimes your mind and body need longer than expected to feel safe again. And that is not weakness. That is reality. Carl Jung also wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And maybe part of becoming stronger is finally acknowledging what hurt you instead of pretending it never mattered. Acknowledging the disappointment, the loneliness, the burnout, the pressure you carried quietly, not to stay trapped in pain forever, but because honesty is often where healing begins. You do not need to hate the version of yourself that struggled. That version survived things nobody else fully saw. That exhausted version of you still woke up and kept going, still tried, still endured, even on days when it felt impossible. So maybe instead of constantly trying to go back to who you once were, you can slowly begin asking a different question. Who am I becoming now? Not who you were before the pain. Not who other people expect you to be. Just who you honestly are after everything you've lived through. Because maybe growth is not about becoming fearless or perfectly healed. Maybe it's about becoming softer with yourself, less ashamed of your emotions, less harsh about your struggles, less focused on pretending you are unaffected by everything life has placed on your shoulders. You are allowed to miss older versions of yourself, but you are also allowed to believe that your story did not end when you changed. There is still life ahead of you. Still moments of peace waiting for you. Still parts of yourself you have not discovered yet. And maybe this tired version of you is not broken. Maybe this version is simply learning how to live more honestly than before. Sometimes people save you in ways they never fully realize. Not through dramatic speeches, not through perfect advice, not through life-changing moments that look important from the outside. Sometimes they save you quietly, through patience, through kindness, through simply staying when life felt unbearably heavy. There are moments in life where one gentle conversation can keep someone going longer than they planned to. One message, one small act of care. One person saying, "I'm here if you need anything," and actually meaning it. When people are struggling emotionally, they often become quieter about it. They stop explaining how tired they feel. They stop asking for help. They begin carrying everything internally because they don't want to feel like a burden. And loneliness slowly grows around them. Not always physical loneliness. Sometimes emotional loneliness. The feeling that nobody truly sees how hard life has become for you lately. That's why small moments of connection matter so much. A friend checking in unexpectedly. Someone remembering something you casually mentioned weeks ago. Someone noticing your silence instead of ignoring it. Those moments can reach people more deeply than anyone realizes. Because when someone feels emotionally overwhelmed, They are often searching for proof that they still matter to somebody. Not for attention, not for pity. Just reassurance that they are not carrying life completely alone. And maybe when you think back on your hardest seasons, you can remember certain people who helped you survive them. The person who sat beside you without forcing conversation. The friend who kept inviting you out even when you constantly declined. The coworker who treated you gently during a stressful period. The person who gave you space without making you feel abandoned. At the time, they may have thought they were doing something small. But emotionally exhausted people remember kindness very deeply, especially during periods where life feels cold and overwhelming. Carl Jung once said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." And sometimes, the people who comfort us best are the ones who understand struggle themselves. Not because they have perfect answers, but because they know what pain feels like. So they become softer, more patient, less judgmental. They know how important simple compassion can become during difficult seasons. There are people who saved others just by listening without trying to immediately fix everything. That matters more than most people realize, because not every hurting person is searching for solutions. Sometimes they just want someone to sit beside their pain without rushing them through it. Someone who does not say, "You'll get over it." Someone who does not compare struggles. Someone who simply says, "I know this has been hard for you." Those kinds of people become safe places in a world that often feels emotionally rushed. And maybe someone became that safe place for you once. Maybe there was a night where you felt completely overwhelmed, and one conversation softened the heaviness enough for you to keep going. Maybe someone hugged you at the exact moment you were trying your hardest not to fall apart. Maybe someone's ordinary kindness arrived during a time when you secretly felt invisible. Human beings remember those moments, not because they solve everything permanently, but because they interrupt hopelessness. And hopelessness can become dangerous when carried alone too long. There are people walking around right now who have no idea their kindness changed someone's life. No idea their patience mattered. No idea their words stayed in someone's memory for years. Because when people are emotionally exhausted, even small kindnesses become meaningful. A warm tone, a thoughtful message. Someone asking, "Did you make it home okay?" Someone noticing you've been quieter lately. These things sound ordinary until you are the person desperately needing them. And maybe this is why gentleness matters so much. Because everyone is carrying something invisible. Stress, fear, loneliness, pressure, private grief, emotional exhaustion nobody fully sees. Some people are fighting battles silently while still trying to smile through conversations. You never fully know how close someone is to giving up internally. That's why kindness is never wasted. Even brief moments of understanding can become emotional lifelines for people who feel overwhelmed by life. And maybe you have been that person for others too, without realizing it. Maybe your patience kept someone calmer during a terrible week. Maybe your encouragement mattered more than you know. Maybe your presence made someone feel less alone during one of the hardest periods of their life. People rarely announce when they are barely holding on. Most continue functioning quietly. That's why compassion matters in ordinary moments, not only during crises, not only when pain becomes visible. Everyday gentleness matters too. Carl Jung also said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." And every human interaction leaves something behind. Some interactions deepen shame. Others soften it. Some people make others feel smaller. Others make people feel safe enough to breathe again. The people who save us emotionally are rarely perfect people. They are simply present people. People who stay kind in a harsh world. People who choose understanding instead of judgment. People who make space for honesty. And maybe healing happens more through those moments than we realize. Not through dramatic breakthroughs, but through repeated experiences of feeling seen, respected, heard, and emotionally safe. That kind of care slowly reminds people they are still worthy of connection, still worthy of support, still worthy of love, even in difficult seasons. So if you have someone in your life who stayed gentle with you while you were struggling, hold on to that gratitude. And if you are trying to survive a heavy season right now, remember this too. You do not need to carry every painful thought alone. There are still people capable of understanding you, still people capable of kindness, still people who would rather sit with your honesty than watch you suffer silently. Sometimes we survive because of people who never even realized they were helping us survive. And honestly, that may be one of the most beautiful things about being human. There's a reason you're tired. People do not become emotionally exhausted for no reason. Usually it happens slowly, after carrying stress for too long, after disappointment keeps repeating itself, after months or years of trying to stay strong while silently struggling underneath everything. Sometimes life asks more from people than they know how to give. Responsibilities pile up. Pressure increases. Unexpected problems appear. Relationships become complicated. The future starts feeling uncertain. And little by little, a person becomes worn down. Not weak. Worn down. There's a difference. A lot of people blame themselves for being emotionally exhausted. They think they should be stronger, more productive, more disciplined, more positive. But human beings are not machines. Nobody can carry constant pressure without eventually feeling overwhelmed by it. And maybe lately, you've been trying so hard just to keep functioning that you forgot how much effort survival actually requires. Even waking up can feel difficult during heavy seasons. Even answering messages can feel emotionally draining. Even simple responsibilities can feel enormous when your mind is exhausted. Yet somehow, you are still here, still trying, still waking up, still carrying parts of your life, even when it feels heavy. That matters more than you think it does, because survival is not always loud or inspiring. Sometimes, survival looks very quiet. Brushing your teeth, despite feeling emotionally numb. Getting through work while your thoughts feel overwhelming. Holding back tears in public and continuing your day anyway. Trying again after another difficult night with your own mind. People rarely talk about these kinds of victories, but they are victories. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And becoming who you truly are is rarely comfortable. Sometimes it begins with exhaustion, with realizing the life you built around pressure, fear, people-pleasing, or emotional suppression is no longer sustainable. Sometimes it begins when you finally admit to yourself, "I cannot keep living like this forever." That realization can feel frightening at first, because once you become honest about your pain, you can no longer pretend everything is fine. You begin noticing how long you've neglected your own emotional needs, how often you've ignored your exhaustion, how much energy you spend trying to appear okay for everyone else. And maybe part of you feels ashamed for struggling this much. But struggling does not make you a failure. It makes you a person who has been carrying more than they were meant to carry alone. There are people who smile every day while privately fighting intense loneliness. People who continue helping others while secretly feeling emotionally empty themselves. People who appear functional while quietly falling apart internally. Pain does not always look dramatic from the outside. Sometimes it looks like a person who is unusually quiet lately, a person canceling plans more often, a person who says they're just tired because explaining the truth feels too exhausting. And maybe you've become that person recently. Maybe there are parts of your pain nobody fully sees. The overthinking, the emotional exhaustion, the fear about the future, the quiet sadness you carry into ordinary days. But even now, there is still something inside you refusing to completely give up, even if it feels small. Maybe it's the part of you that still hopes life can feel lighter someday. Maybe it's the part that keeps searching for meaning, even after difficult seasons. Maybe it's simply the part of you that continues waking up every morning, despite how tired you feel. That part matters, because hopelessness tells people nothing will ever change. But life changes constantly. Feelings change. Seasons change. People change. Pain changes too. What feels unbearable now may not feel this heavy forever. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And maybe part of healing is finally allowing yourself to acknowledge how difficult this chapter has truly been. Not minimizing it, not dismissing it, not comparing your pain to everyone else's. Just honestly admitting, this has been hard for me. There is strength in that kind of honesty. Real strength is not pretending nothing affects you. Real strength is remaining hard enough to feel, even after life has exhausted you. And maybe right now, you are in a season where your main job is not becoming extraordinary. Maybe your main job right now is simply learning how to care for yourself again, learning how to rest without guilt, learning how to stop punishing yourself for being tired, learning how to speak to yourself with more kindness than criticism. Because many exhausted people are already carrying enough pain without adding self-hatred to it. You deserve compassion too. Not only when you are productive, not only when you appear emotionally strong. You deserve compassion while you are struggling too.